Of all the bosses in Elden Ring's DLC, Romina, Saint of the Bud, might feel like she has the greatest missed potential. After being teased in the story trailer, she is found near the end of our journey in a small remote courtyard, where she has no cutscene, no dialogue, and only a few items reference her. The base game established rot as a fascinating and complex topic within the world's lore, so it's only natural if you felt like there should have been more to Romina's story. However, though there were likely various plans for Romina that didn't make it into the final cut, such as her voice lines, there's actually a lot we can learn from Romina, from the true nature of rot and its history, to understanding a core aspect of the Hornsent culture, something that is found even in the lands between, to insights into the Rauh Civilization, and perhaps even that Romina actually betrayed the Hornsent. Let's begin with the history of Romina and the Church of the Bud prior to Messmer's crusade. The Church of the Bud was not originally a place of rot worship. There was a time when these buds were not touched by the Scarlet Rot's blight, when they were the symbol of the small church deep in the ancient ruins of Rauh. The bud is a separate phenomenon. The Oxford Dictionary describes a bud as a compact growth on a plant that develops into a leaf, flower, or shoot. Naturally, with the literal metaphors FromSoft likes to use in their games, and the importance of trees in the world of Elden Ring, a bud relates to more than just plant life. And we've seen this in the base game, where beyond plants, buds can refer to horns, and in some instances, even people.
The girl, Millicent, she is a bud.
Which relates in turn to the role of the world trees in the game as part of the complete cycle of life. So once, the church was unrelated to Scarlet Rot. If we look at the architecture, it becomes clear that the church is in fact of Hornsent design. It has the same reliefs, brickwork, and detailing seen in various Hornsent towns across the realm of Shadow, as well as Ballarat and Anera Lim. From this, we can infer that the Bud was important enough to the Hornsent to construct a church devoted entirely to it. There is even a torch design in the Land of the Tower, which appears to depict some form of bud at the centre of a ship. But what is the Bud, and why is it important to the Hornsent? There are no further references to what a bud might be in the remnants of the Hornsent civilization, but there is actually a society in the lands between from which we can learn the answer. A culture which rejects the Erdtree and seeks to return to nature, reviving techniques that came before. The ancestral followers. The more you look, the clearer it becomes that the ancestral followers have based much of their culture on Hornsent traditions. First and foremost is the focus on horns. Only the repeated sprouting of fresh horns can create a tangled horn, which is viewed as an irrefutable symbol of primacy. The ancestral followers believe that the horns of a long-lived beast continue to bud like antlers, over and over again, until the beast one day becomes an ancestral spirit. As if to emphasize the inspirations at play here, the ancestral follower horn talismans are simply lesser versions of the Hornsent iterations. In addition, both cultures also look down upon those without them. The Hornsent has a clear hierarchy surrounding the ability to grow horns, and are infamously harsh on peoples without them. In a similar fashion, the ancestral followers have weapons considered envoys' wings, made to reap the lives of beings which experience no sprouting. Similarly, while it might be a natural conclusion that horned creatures would be protected by both civilizations, it is actually the contrary. The deadliest of horned predators enjoy the sport of hunting and devouring other horned creatures. This is how the ancestral followers, who have not yet actually sprouted buds of their own, wear the horns of other creatures. The Hornsent use horns to invoke divinity, which forms a central pillar to their civilization, around which much of their societal hierarchy is based. The ancestral followers believe horns beget the power of an ancestral spirit, through which can be found a new cycle of life and death beyond the power of the Erdtree. In essence, horns serve as a medium for channeling the power of spirits. Tangled horns are a symbol of spirituality. We see this in action time and again in both cultures. The Hornsent in their divine invocation, their ability to summon spirits, in tutelary deities, and beyond. The ancestral followers are versed in distinctive spiritual arts, use magic bows that excel with dwelling arrows, in which the spirits of small animals are thought to dwell, and their exceptional bowmanship enlivens the arrow with spiritual essence. Not to mention the display of power shown by the ancestral spirits, which hold power over the lives of the spirit animals around them. It grants them life, and in granting their death, it can absorb their power and nature, taking on new fighting styles. All this is likely why the ancestral followers chant for new buds to sprout not just from their very flesh, but their souls too. The focus of buds and horns is spirituality, so it's only natural their belief would extend beyond the physical into the spiritual. And if there was any doubt as to the shared nature of plant buds and horn buds in Elden Ring, if you look closely at the body of an ancestral spirit, on their horns are growing leaves. So, buds or horns relate to the divination of spirits. They serve as the medium through which the power of spirits can be unlocked. If we return to the Church of the Bud with this knowledge, it's only natural the Hornsent built such a church here. If the ancestral followers take after the Hornsent, then the Hornsent take after the ancient civilization of Rauh in turn. Hornsent spirits are found all over the ruins here, and most are excavating the region in a large-scale research effort. These Hornsent academics have made records of the spiritual discoveries found in the ancient ruins, thought lost to antiquity, either in cookbooks or on these stone tablets, which have since been, for the most part, taken and stored in the specimen storehouse, after Messmer's Fire Knights refused their orders in a movement where they urged that the specimens be preserved. The Rauh Civilisation's history is steeped in the power of spirits and horns. In an age long past, before this land was enshrouded in shadow, the vitality of the Crucible flourished. Remains of this can be seen in the ancient ruins. Of all the realm of shadow that once thrived with the blessings of the Crucible, now the Rauh Ruins stand out as the strongest remnant of the bygone era, and this is still seen in the life that remains. An exceedingly rare to find calculus, suffused with spirituality, found only by hunting horned beasts in the ancient ruins of Rauh. This, in addition to a beast horn suffused with spirituality, can be used to create a sprite stone, a lost technique of the Rauh Civilization. Sprite stones can be manipulated by bond stones, which reveal an interesting belief this ancient civilization had towards the spirits they made use of. Bonds with the sprites were made to be broken. All this is why the Hornsent built their church next to the ancient ruins. For Romina to have worked at the Church of the Bud, she must have been somewhat important in the Hornsent society, though it's unclear what her station was exactly. However, I believe she was a high-ranking member of the church, such that she had the knowledge or station to betray her people's trust, and aid in the destruction wrought by Messmer's crusade. One thing that always stood out to me is that there are only 3 required bosses to beat the DLC. Messmer, whose kindling is needed to burn the sealing tree that enshrouds an era limb in its divine gate. Promised consort Radahn, the culmination of the main quest, and Miquella's journey to godhood. And then, there's Romina. Both the other bosses have 2 cutscenes and tons of lore throughout the realm of shadow in one way or another. Romina, on the other hand, has no cutscenes, no dialogue, and the only direct references are from gear made with her own remembrance. I'm sure Romina was at one point in development going to play a larger role, but what FromSoft has done with Romina is still very deliberate. Making Romina a required boss fight, where so many others are optional, is no accident, and I believe they are trying to tell us something here. So let's review what we know about the Saint of the Bud. Romina was there during Messmer's crusade. Once, in the crumbling, burning church, Romina held the Bud in speechless silence. A scene briefly shown in the story trailer, where you can see what is now her weapon, the pole blade of the Bud. After the church was burned to the ground, Romina discovered a twisted divine element, which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot. It was after the devastation of Messmer's crusade that Romina discovered and brought into being the rot seen in the present day. Otherwise, there is very little on Romina, not just before the crusade, but after as well. Recent giant scorpions are said to trace back to the Church of the Bud. At some point, Romina's body evolved, or infused, with inhuman biology, such that she has the wings of a butterfly, floral motifs around her head and chest, and her body spirals into that of a scorpion and a centipede. She even has a wasp stinger hidden beneath. It makes you wonder if this relates to grafting, that would hint at some relation to the shamans, and might be where the title Saint came from. Though that's only speculation, it does have some interesting implications as to Romina's origins. Alternatively, it is also very possible that it's simply the outer god of rot's power that manifests in this way through Romina, similar to how Mog can sprout wings from the influence of the formless mother. The abandoned pests found a mother in Romina, but she has not ordered them to do her bidding or spread her teachings, and instead they are all either close at hand or down in the valley below. There are members of the Forager Brood beyond her direct influence found throughout the realm, with ties to more, who lack the distinct pink-red coloration. In fact, Romina hasn't even moved from the church that once burned around her, and doesn't seem to have tried. It's as though she can't move away from this place, whether by duty or by guilt. Let's return to this scene in the story trailer, where Romina holds the bud in silence. This is definitely Romina, not just because the weapon is the same, but because it's her theme that plays during this segment.
One that could never be put to song. The tyranny of Messmer's flame.
So, given she was part of the Hornsent church, is it not strange how close the nearby soldiers are to Romina? Why does she not run? Perhaps she had simply given up, but to me she doesn't look afraid of the nearby soldiers. And similarly, the soldiers' calm, ruthless march looks uninterested in her. But I don't think this is because they haven't seen her. The purge of the Hornsent was incredibly thorough, nor is she at all hidden. The only way I could see Messmer's forces actually missing her is if this had been an unremarkable locale they swiftly passed through. But this was not a random location. This was the Church of the Bud, a place of worship for the Hornsent, a place which was most likely targeted, and which was even returned to later with the Sealing Tree. And yet, Romina, and only Romina, survives the crusade not by hiding or running, but simply kneeling within the church itself, in speechless silence. To me, her posture is not actually one of defeat or of someone who has given up, but one of sorrow, or even of remorse and guilt. And this betrayal is strongly hinted at by what happened next. The Sealing Tree obscures the tower in shadow. It cannot be burned without Messmer's kindling. At the end of Messmer's crusade, Enerelim and its divine gate was sealed away, much like the realm of shadow itself, such that none should be able to walk the path to godhood as Marika had done so many years earlier. The Sealing Tree is such an important structure, and yet it's Romina of all people who guards it, not a tree sentinel nor a fire knight, right to the present day. Romina is the one who defends the ever-important tree which obscures the tower. FromSoft chose to make her compulsory. They're trying to say something here, and I think the message is that there's a reason Romina is responsible for defending the Sealing Tree. A tree that was placed right next to her church, a church which she somehow survived the burning of despite her inactivity, and a location where Romina remained right to the present day without contest from Messmer's forces despite the proximity to the Sealing Tree. I believe Romina somehow betrayed the Hornsent during the crusade. I believe she survived right next to Messmer's soldiers because they were allies, not enemies. And I believe as part of this, she has been charged with the station of defending the Sealing Tree ever since. Now, hear me out, because this doesn't just explain the oddities in Romina's history, but this lens of betrayal, regret, and the death of her comrades explains how she discovered rot, and by it, found solace. Romina discovered a twisted divine element, which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot. Perhaps then, the buds might find somewhere to gain purchase once more, within the scorched remains. Famously, in the wake of the Crusade, Romina found new purpose in the resplendence of rot.
The cycle of decay and rebirth.
Rot is one of the divine elements of the Outer Gods, and eats away at life like a vicious plague. Where the buds of the church previously served to aid the Hornsent in their spiritual pursuits, the buds were now able to be repurposed to serve as a medium for the outer god of rot. In the base game, flowers and buds were commonly paired with rot, so it always felt strange that the Church of the Bud, which is now infested with rot, was once unrelated. How could the church seem to fit rot so well, and yet be totally separate, only coincidentally having rot weaved into it at a later date? Well, there's a reason Romina was able to find rot. Romina discovered a twisted divine element. Twisted means some form of bending, curling, or distortion, or some form of rotation around a stationary point. That's to say, Romina looked at what was a familiar divine element with a new, twisted angle and discovered rot. Similar phrasing is used when describing the revelations of the Blood Fiends, or the Lamenters. The Blood Fiends peered upon the corpse of their ancestor, normally an act of sanctity, and saw in its shadow a twisted deity. A deity they hadn't seen there before, but after the brutality of the Crusade, they discovered a new side to their familiar rituals. Similarly, the Lamenters were shunned for reaching conclusions that felt unnatural and foreign to the Hornsent. A stone mask twisted into an expression of rapturous grief. Romina discovered rot in the same place as her previous beliefs. She just approached with an altered mindset after betraying her people. Just as the Hornsent had found buds, horns, and spirituality within the Rauh Civilization, so too did Romina discover rot here as well. Within the ruins there is a unique talisman, a discus made of verdigris, the corroded metal known for its heft. Verdigris is said to be the gift of an outer god. In our world, verdigris is a bright bluish-green incrustation or patina formed on copper or brass by atmospheric oxidation. Like how rust relates to iron, it's made by the rotting away of the metal. But something that I've really loved about the lore of Elden Ring's DLC is that it's demonstrated the positive qualities of rot more clearly. Rot is often seen as stagnation, since flowing water is the antithesis to rot, but this is not the case. Rot is the cycle of decay and rebirth. It is overflowing life with a high rate of turnover. It is life pushed to an extremity. But in the realm of Shadow, it's been made clear that the result of such life is not always damaging. Those who dwell within poison know rot all too well, the death that begets life, that comes to all equally. That is to say, it is the cycle of rebirth put into practice. Rot is not death or stagnation, but a cycle of rebirth. It can definitely be argued that this is a crude cycle, and the wisdom of those who devote themselves to rot is certainly not something many share. Though men might recognise the keen intellect of the pests evidenced by the spear's uncanny design, it will never be understood by them. But rot can produce powerful and wonderful effects. The effects of the forager brood's pickled delights are enhanced by the fermentation, or rotting, of the ingredients. Not to mention, the friendly nature of Moor and the forager brood is something we never saw in the Kindred of Rot from the base game. Perhaps the relation to rot also explains the popularity of scorpion livers in the Hornsent cuisine, a delicacy known for its numbing toxins. And verdigris's incredible power arises from its corrosion, possessed of an enormously hefty yet supple strength, thanks to its rusted nature. Verdigris, and of course the pickled livers, illustrate that rot can have a protective power too, caring for those both alive and dead. The shield will continue to protect its target even if its bearer should die. Similarly, verdigris magic is able to knock back enemies without causing significant harm. So how does verdigris relate to the ancient ruins? The civilization of Rauh deserves its own proper dive, but in brief, their culture can be boiled down into a few core themes. There's the strong association with the Crucible and spirits, as we've looked at already. There's the focus on divine light, seen in the Sword of Light and the Invisible Walkway, the Miranda flowers, and the Sprite Stones. Not to mention the Spira of the Hornsent and the spiral symbolism which derive from their Crucible worship. And then, there is also a theme of fire and water. Water flows throughout the ancient ruins, and the ruins in the lands between are commonly paired with water too, whether on the coast in Limgrave and Caelid, in underground water-filled caverns, as part of an aqueduct in the ruin-strewn precipice, or by the frozen river in the mountaintops. Similarly, the Rauh Civilization repeatedly relates to fire. Their culture was familiar with fire sprites and imbued them into Rauh burrows. There are the Blackstone golems, powered by fire. The forges, which clearly relate to Rauh in some manner through the golem smiths, who, like the Blackstone golems, can be rewired into attacking their allies with a crystal dart. The Rauh at the very least relate to the giants as well, known for their power over flame. The Rauh Ruins are of a scale that suggests giant biology. The mother of all crucibles, found in the ruins where the crucible strongly manifests, is rumoured to have sprouted upon giants. The forge of the giants itself is placed upon Rauh architecture and shares the same stone detailing. Not to mention, the last remaining fire giant makes use of, and is adorned with, what could be verdigris gear. All this is to say that the Rauh Civilization confidently wielded the power of flowing water and of fire. Fire and water may seem unrelated to each other, but I ask you, what do both of these techniques excel at staving off? You guessed it, Scarlet Rot. It was a swordmaster whose blade was patterned after flowing water, who famously sealed away rot itself, and later taught Melania to aid in her fight against the rot within. Similarly, Scarlet Rot is kept at bay with flame. The fire monks even managed to cure themselves of toxins by creating a fire within. And to tie the two together, there are the Dancers of Renar, whose swords have the same dancing moveset as the flowing curved sword, offering a glimpse into the legend. They utilised burning oil in their flowing dances, which were revealed at the height of their passion with an explosion of searing flame. The Dance of Renar is one of burning passion. The skills of EG in the present day illustrates there yet remain some techniques against rot, likely passed down since the times of Rauh.
His swords were all blunt as stone, but not one of them decayed when faced with the scarlet rot.
Just in case it's not already clear, I think it's important to mention that Romina did not discover rot. Listen to these descriptions. The scarlet butterflies, bereft of a master, were soothed by Romina, who reached out to them. The kindred of rot are servants of the goddess of rot, but they are abandoned servants, and it is for this reason that they found a mother in the Saint of the Bud. Romina did not discover rot, but rediscovered it, picking up the broken pieces from a time long past, which fits the lore we know elsewhere. Scarlet Rot is an old legend. Messmer's crusade took place well into the reign of Marika, as we've looked at in previous videos, and it's clear that the god of rot existed in truly ancient times. This vast region is said to be the grave of civilizations that flourished before the Erdtree. In the lightless depths lies the grave of an ancient civilization. The Claymen served as the priests in the ancient dynasty. There has likely been a number of ancient cultures throughout these subterranean regions, but their history well beyond the Erdtree's age is clear. Furthermore, they share much of their architecture and even statues, including the clearly important unnamed man clutching a tablet, who is notably found at the Lake of Rot, flanking the entrance to the Grand Cloister. This structure was clearly once very important to Rot, not just by the environmental storytelling, or the pests praying to the statue at the end of the hall, but because this is where a ceremonial tool crafted from the relic of a sealed outer god can be found, the Scorpion Stinger. A great lake downstream of the Ainzel River, it is said that the divine essence of an outer god is sealed away in this land. According to myth, these butterflies were once the wings of the goddess of Rot herself. Once, the outer god of Rot was venerated by a powerful civilization, which followed a goddess of Rot as their leader. Famously, however, this god was sealed away by the blind swordsman, who many years later became Melania's teacher. O scarlet blossoms, flourish in distant lands and return to us, the unwanted children. The followers of Rot lost their leader and their purpose, and scattered across the land. Finally, the Japanese translation for Romina's remembrance moves away from the concept of her weaving the rot into being, and instead describes her discovering a twisted holiness, and that she clung to the ominous scarlet rot in the hopes the bud would bloom in the burned church once again. Importantly, though the outer god of rot was sealed away, like all outer gods, their influence can never truly be removed from the world. the outer god being sealed is not evidence that Romina should have been unable to weave rot into her buds, evidenced best by how Malenia is infested with rot. Whatever timeline you believe, Malenia has to have been born after rot was sealed away. So if a demigod, the daughter of a true god, is unable to repel the influence of rot, then there can be no doubt that Romina could weave rot into being, despite the previous downfall of the Rauh Civilization. So, the Rauh Civilization excelled at fighting off rot, and it was in ancient times the god of rot was sealed away. And yet, I don't personally believe the Rauh Civilization is responsible for rot's demise. Within the Rauh Ruins are a number of statues, one of which depicts a female figure that must have been deeply venerated. Her statues are large and detailed, plentiful, and found in places that honour them. Even today, some Hornsent continue to worship her. But in front of one such statue are, curiously, a number of kindreds of rot, who pray to the statue in the same manner as the kindred in the Grand Cloister, where the god of rot was sealed away. The person depicted by the statue was clearly important within the Rauh culture to the crucible shown by the Hornsent worship, and was likely of giant stature. But it is also clear that she was a symbol of veneration for those who served the goddess of rot. From this, I believe we can infer that the civilization of Rauh didn't fight against the power of rot, but embraced it, with a control that hasn't been seen since. Through their mastery over flowing water and fire, they were able to tame the rot to not just be manageable, but to harness its power to actually help people. Great weight makes for great strength, the strength to protect others. Whether rot was part of their civilization or a fellow faction is up for debate, since we see verdigris-like materials among the fire giants, in Farum Azula, and perhaps even on the weapon impaled on the enormous drake in the Land of Shadow. I'm keen to hear what your thoughts are in the comments, but I think we can at least be sure that Rauh was involved with rot in a positive light. Through the Rauh Civilization, we can finally see the true potential of rot, not as a scourge that brings only suffering and stagnation, but as something that can be kept in control and used to incredible, protective effect. Just like the pickled livers say, though rot results in a pungent odour, some come to find the aroma irresistible. One need only look deeper. The Hornsent never saw the potential of rot. They saw suffering and stagnation, rather than power or beauty, and as such, appear to have only studied the Rauh Civilization through the lens of the Crucible, looking at horns and spirituality. But the same buds they venerated could also be twisted to channel rot with their divine power. And this is what Romina finally saw after she had betrayed the Hornsent civilization. She looked at the same church, the same buds, and in them discovered a twisted divine element, which she weaved into the baleful scarlet rot. Perhaps then, the buds might find somewhere to gain purchase once more, within the scorched remains. It's quite curious that rot was able to blossom out of the scorched remains, given fire usually keeps rot back. I wonder if the Hornsent actively disagreed with the rot within the Rauh culture, rather than only being ignorant of it. Romina's purification is the ash of war for her pole blade of the bud armament, a tool that preceded the crusade and thus the weaving of rot into the church. This ash of war floats the user into the air to slice through the area, unleashing 2 large sweeping slashes. This was once considered a sacred act of purification. Once implies that this was a sacred act from before the crusade, during the Hornsent rule. Purification means the removal of contaminants from something, which suggests there was some influence appearing in the church that was unwelcome. To me, the sweeping motion seems reminiscent of pruning or mowing, like unwanted buds perhaps. I only speculate here, but what if rot did have some means of manifesting in the church even before Romina, and the clergy had to periodically cleanse the area of it? Whatever the case may be, Romina inverted this act, where before the place was swept clean, she now imbues her bud blade with scarlet rot butterflies beforehand, actively spreading rot across the area. I believe rot in particular resonated with Romina after her betrayal. Rot is the cycle of rebirth put into practice. She found meaning in embracing the outer god of rot, and embracing that death begets life, perhaps to aid the guilt for her people's massacre. Life sprouts from death, as it does from birth, such is the way of the living. In the culture the Hornsent already revered, she found an answer that allowed for death as part of its cycle. a belief that a high turnover of life can be a good thing, something we see in action during her boss fight, where in the second phase she brings to life hordes of butterflies, only to kill them in a chain explosion a moment later. She draws from both sides of the Rauh culture, an appreciation of rot, and the understanding that bonds are made to be broken. Romina extended kindness and welcomed those who had been abandoned, and Romina extended death too, for in death she could deliver peace and new beginnings. Her poison flower blooms twice technique epitomizes this belief, shortening the suffering of those who are blighted in exchange for much more damage. I wonder if her appearance today mirrors this duality of rot, of life and death. One part is a centipede, something which is seen only a handful of times elsewhere, and is typically paired with death. Most famously as the half-wheel wounds of the centipedes found on Ranni and Godwyn from the Night of Black Knives, a mark called the curse mark of death. In Japanese culture, centipedes represent decay, rot, or impurity, which are all found within corpses. Could that mean the scorpion is a symbol of virility and of life? Between the two aspects, the centipede is the primary attacking force in the fight, delivering death, but it is the scorpion that delivers rot directly, the overactive form of life. Perhaps this is how the native scorpions of the region grew to giant size since Romina embraced the rot, and how Starscourge Radahn is so large. I'm really glad that the DLC presented the positive side of rot, as it's something that's reflected in our own world. Verdigris, for example, though it is a form of corrosion, serves as a protective outer layer to prevent the metal beneath from further harm. When life dies and rots, it creates a bed from which new life can flourish. There are tons of flora that require rotting to ensure the land is fertile enough to bloom. Just as in Elden Ring, those who are not equipped to deal with it can find rot dangerous, but those that have specifically adapted, usually insects and arachnids, or fungi and mushrooms, can live amidst rot, hence the visual themes in Elden Ring. And I think the comparisons made to Malenia help to emphasize the difference between these two characters, where one fought against the rot within her, while the other embraced it. FromSoft actively want us to make this comparison as well, I believe, as the soundtrack for Romina features Malenia's theme within it. And though this could be seen as just the theme of rot, the entire track goes quiet to give the Malenia reference center stage for a bit. These are separate instances of rot. And there's one other clear difference we've all noticed as well, the colour of rot. Malenia's hue is a strong red, where Romina's palette is much more pink. We've got a whole video on the importance of colour in Elden Ring you can check out, and here this would indicate that Romina's iteration is further from yellow. It is less chaotic and out of control. Instead, it's closer to purple and blue, closer to the bridge between worlds and to conscious thought. Life and death all together, but all in balance. Romina found purchase within rot as a means to redeem herself after betraying her kind. This is how she saw the wisdom of rot, and why she weaved it into being at the Church of the Bud. She provided a home for unwanted, abandoned children of the Outer God, and sought not power, but meaning in the death she had caused. She remained faithful to her commitment to guard the sealing tree right to the present day, seeking not redemption or honour, but to belong. Something that, though it was cut, I think Romina's dialogue would have depicted well.
Children of the tower, butterflies, take wing.
If you made it this far, consider supporting the channel and get early access to upcoming releases, feature your own theories on the channel, or even get access to new Lore Before Bed videos ad-free for less than $1. Your support makes content like this possible, so thank you.